Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the next meeting of the Town and City Centre Commission. I think this is our third or fourth meeting now. The Commission's meeting to consider various different aspects and challenges that are facing the High Street. We've been receiving evidence from the public, and we've been receiving evidence, if you like, from different speakers who we've invited. So there's a number of councillors that are on the commission. It's myself as chair, Councillor Richard Beecham, and the vice chair is Councillor Charles Fifield, and then we're joined by Councillor Samantha Dixon, Councillor Samantha Naylor, and also on the committee is Councillor Lynn Gibbon, who I'm not sure if she's in yet, and Councillor Gillian Edwards. Today we're going to have a quick review of the format of the report, and then we'll be hearing evidence from our business improvement district, two of those that are in the town centres, that's Chester and Northwich, and then some kind of experiences from an independent business, which will be the Coffee House in Northwich, some information from Jan Adlin and Heather Stambridge from the LEP and Cushman and Wakefield respectively, and that's talking about offices and co-working space. And then we've got Karen Bates, who's the manager of our markets here in Cheshire West and Chester. So,
sorry, Chair, could I just interrupt? Could one of the officers give Lynn Gibbon a ring? She's just rung me to say the wonderful new laptop is not letting her into the meeting.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, don't worry. Can one of the officers pick this up for me? Would that be okay?
Thank you.
I'm going to do declarations of interest now as the first agenda item. I know there's a standing one for you, Charles, if you want to do that.
Yes, just to confirm that obviously I work at director at Fifield Glyn, so I will occasionally make comments in relation to my day job, and as I say, I'm a chartered surveyor, so I'll just make that declaration for the avoidance of doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. So the next part, in the last committee, we received members of the commission have received quite a lot of attachments. The updated dashboard report was something that we asked for, and I think the officers have done a good job at reflecting the different things that we asked for. They were largely about how the report was formatted and how data had been drawn from different wards to link to different urban areas. So I can take some comments on that in a second. The other stuff has been the recovery framework document that's been sent through from the High Street Task Force, the example of the fishbone sheet, and the information, the call for evidence responses that we've had from the public. And the document that we received that talks about how the format of the report is going to be. The reason why this is important is I'm very keen that we kind of come out of this with a strong set of actions that we can just get to work with straight away. And I think that there's lots of good examples of stuff out there where town centres have pulled together committees, have set themselves some targets and then gone off and delivered them. And I'm very keen that the Commission comes out with a framework that allows different areas in our borough to do that, that takes the best bits of good practice from all of these different things that are circulated about the future of high streets, that understands the relationships that we've already got with people like the bids in the different towns where we have them, and tries to basically set an agenda for all of those different groups in a partnership, and gives that a structure which can be reported on across all of the different areas, that talks about ways in which we're going to improve footfall, and that might be through developing events, who's responsible for that, those kind of things. So that's where I'm going. So that's what I hope has come out in the proposed report format. That's agenda item 2 on our agenda today. But I'll take comments from anybody if anybody's got any. I'm only hoping to spend a couple of minutes on this so that we can get on to hearing from the people that have come to join us. But is there any members of the committee that have got any comments they want to make about this proposal? Sam Dixon's got a hand up.
Yes, I thought it was very good. Really agree with the draft proposal. The dashboard I thought was excellent. Just one comment about the feedback from residents. Quite a lot of them have done it it's embedded as an attachment, and I'm struggling to get into the attachment.
Yeah, I had that problem as well.
So I don't know if that could be resolved so that we see everyone's comments. Some of them have written a lot, so clearly we need to review even it. Charles's father, I noticed.
Yeah. Beth, could we circulate the attachments that are linked in the document as individual attachments to members of the commission after this meeting? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll do that.
Thanks, Beth. Lynn, you're here. You okay?
Yes, I'm all right now. Yeah.
Excellent.
New equipment, so I wasn't sure how to get in. I've mastered it.
No problem. We're at point 2, which is about the proposed format for the final report of the commission, and we're just discussing that. So if you've got any comments, Charles had his hand up next, but if you want to go after him, just go ahead. Go for it, yeah, Charles.
I was just going to say, I think that what you're proposing as the format makes a lot of sense. And I think with the benefit of hindsight from the previous report, is what that tried to come up with was a number of areas with a view that the localities needed to look at those issues. Some of them might be quite relevant, some of them weren't going to be as relevant depending on the locality, but the idea was that should have been a bit of a checklist. Now, my gut feel is unfortunately that never happened, and I think if we can learn something from that one is to make sure that this time that it's quite clear what the localities are going to be looking at, and just being able to pick those out, which they may be very relevant for Chester and not relevant for Northwich, and vice versa. But I think yes, that is a good way of doing it. The only other thought I had about it was the potential that it might be worth, as a recommendation at some point, is that this report should be done again at some point in the future, so that whether it's it's once a council term, I don't know, but I just felt that that to me, I think because of the way the world changes, is it will be a bit of a scrutiny idea to go and do again.
I think that I think that's a good point. I think the report that you did in 2014 has obviously formed the basis for what we're doing here, and I think, like you said, your report talked about the different things that you could do, and I think what this is a continuation of that, because we end up with a framework for actually delivering against it that we can measure against to see whether things are actually happening. So I think we should be able to see quite clearly across different urban areas the tools that they've chosen to use to try and improve things in their area, whatever that might be, out of the things that we've learned about on this commission. And then we should be able to quite easily see some kind of dashboard that shows what progress has been made against those actions. And I think that's the missing piece really for me in all of this, from the work that was done last time and the work that's been done this time, is how do we actually see what we're doing and see what's been done. Sam, have you still got your hand up to speak, or?
No, I was just going to say there's a role for places scrutiny in this. I don't think it's necessary to reform the commission, but actually places scrutiny might want to consider during the next administration period, which would be 23 to 28, whether they want to revisit it. So just a suggestion.
Councillor Gibbon, anything to add?
No, I was fine. I thought the documents were very good, thank you. And I take on board other people's points. That's great, thank you.
Sam Naylor?
Can you hear me? I've got one of these new fancy headsets on. Can you hear me?
Sound lovely, Sam. Lovely. Clear as a whistle.
Nothing to add at this stage. Thanks, Chair.
No worries. Okay, right. We're going to move on to the next. We'll move on to the next item then, which is about business improvement districts. I'm sure everybody on the commission knows what a business improvement district is and how they come about. But I know Carl is going to talk a little bit about it in his introduction. I'm proposing that we have about 40 odd minutes for this section. So if Carl and Jane want to introduce it, and then the commission members want to ask any questions, if anybody who's also on the call has any questions and we've got time, please do use the raise hand section. I'll have to allow most time for members of the commission to ask questions, but I want it to be as immersive as possible for other people who've joined us. So don't be afraid to put up your hand if you want to ask something or make a point. Carl,
Yeah, hi all.
over to you, mate.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I spoke with Caroline yesterday. Caroline Thomas, she asked me if I could just do a very brief overview of sort of Chester bid, some of the challenges that we've been facing post-COVID, a couple of comments just around the high street in general, and then potentially a couple of areas for collaboration between business improvement districts, local authority. Probably a bit of a starter for 10 for future questions and discussions after I've finished speaking. So yeah, just to introduce myself, my name's Carl Critchlow. I am the manager of CH1 Chester bid.
I've lost sound.
Sorry, I can't hear anything.
We've lost your sound, Carl.
Oh, I thought it was my headphones.
Do you want to mute yours? If you mute yours, Lynn. Carl, just log out and come back in. I think that would probably might help. Are you back?
Hi all.
Yeah.
Excellent. I don't
Carry
know
on.
what happened there. Where do we get up to? So yeah, Carl Critchlow, manager CH1 Chester bid, business improvement district for Chester City Centre. We represent about 460 or so businesses in the core of the city, established back in 2014. For those that you know, bids run in 5-year terms. Last year we were voted in for a second 5-year term by businesses in the city. Main aim for us, we run a range of marketing campaigns, events, responsible for certain elements of city centre management, all with the main aim of trying to make Chester sort of destination of choice for businesses and consumers. Main objectives for us is to sort of drive footfall, increase consumer spend, increase dwell time. Basically, we want more people to come into the city and spend money within our businesses. So that's us in a nutshell. In terms of the bid, how we are funded by a payment called the bid levy. That's made by all the businesses within the city centre who have a rateable value of over £18,000, and brings in about 400k a year for us normally. Obviously, in terms of challenges for the bid, Chester bid, and I'm sure Jane will be able to sort of reaffirm this when she talks about Northwich. Obviously, the main challenge for us at the moment is cash. It is the bid levy, sort of as a result of COVID, particularly around lockdown. Obviously, restrictions on businesses trading. That bid levy that they would be required to pay us every year isn't coming in as quick as it should. That's obviously causes us challenges in terms of projects and initiatives that we would be looking to deliver, basically not having the funds or the capability of doing that because we just don't have the money to do so. Obviously, since lockdown, that's probably been our number one pressure. We have had to cut back on a number of projects and initiatives that we were looking to deliver this year. We have had to reduce the size of the bid team because we obviously need to try and conserve as much money as we can. In terms of bid membership, like I say, we represent about 460 premises within that bid area. In terms of our membership, we've lost about 22 businesses since lockdown. So probably since March, we've seen about 22 businesses close, of which about 19 of those were national chains. So they are businesses that probably would have seen pressures external from Chester. You know, they would have been located in other towns and cities around the country, and so they would have been subject to national pressures rather than just localised ones in Chester city centre. On the flip side of that, we've had about 11 businesses open in the last 4 or 5 months, of which all of them are independents. None of those are national chains. They are all local businesses. So I think that gives a bit of an indication about potentially how the mix of businesses particularly within Chester, is changing. Just a few points on the high street in general. Obviously, Chester, we have seen our footfall decline in recent years. It has been a general downward trend for about the past 2-3 years. Our tourist demand has stopped that footfall decline into levels that we've probably seen in other towns and cities. We do have a very strong tourist draw, so that does mask a lot of the decline. But when speaking with a lot of our core businesses, particularly in retail, they have seen a decline in consumer spend as the footfall has dropped. Obviously, for the high street to be successful, we need a balance of both large retailers. They're the people that basically help drive the footfall. They encourage people into the city, but we also need a good mix of independent businesses, because they're the ones that make Chester unique and make Chester different from other locations around the country. So, you know, from our perspective, and I suppose for this committee's perspective, it is about making sure that we do everything we can as a city of, you know, stakeholders in particular, to make sure that we support both independent businesses and nationals. Neither the council or the bid can run people's business for them, but what we can do is create an environment and an infrastructure that supports businesses in Chester. From my experience, the independents need a lot more help with business support and managing the day-to-day issues of running a business. They don't have that. They don't have the staff numbers to be able to leave their business and get involved in projects and initiatives that could benefit them. But then we also find on the flip side that the larger retailers, obviously they're often national or international businesses, they often lack the local autonomy to be able to get involved at a local level and react to local changes. So that's always a challenge as well. A lot of their marketing in particular is centralized. It comes down from, you know, they will be business marketing strategies that will be, you know, rolled out across the whole country. They won't necessarily be specific to Chester. So they do struggle to react to local opportunities. Both those scenarios obviously need a different approach to be able to business to flourish. But a citywide approach from all stakeholders is needed if we want, you know, both sectors to succeed and ultimately benefit the city centre. Like I say, Caroline asked me to put a couple of points in just as a bit of a starter for 10. We put some written submissions through of information, ideas and suggestions of way that we think Chester could be improved and possibly, you know, would feed into this commission and hopefully influence some of the outcomes. But I've just picked out a couple of key things that I think would, you know, opportunities for collaboration in particular between business improvement districts and the local authority. But like I say, a bit of a starter for 10. So the first one is around proactive business engagement. Obviously, very often businesses, the only contact they have with the likes of the local authority is when they've done something wrong. More often than not, obviously, that's just as a result of businesses not being aware of the certain rules and regulations that often the council are required to enforce. So I think there is a need particularly within Chester, within the city, for some proactive, positive engagement with businesses that actively seeks to overcome some of the issues that they face and try and overcome some of those barriers to growth. But I think on the other side of that will also help build some positive relationships between the local authority and businesses in the city. You know, as a bid, we will be able to facilitate and support that action and obviously encourage businesses to get involved. So I think there is a bit of a two-pronged attack approach on there to try and get businesses involved. I think there's opportunities for joint bids for funding. I think there is, you know, between the local authority and bids in particular, is to develop a strategy to identify and apply for funding. I'm talking about, you know, money that's coming from central government and other sources. I think we could look at the Heritage Action Zone. I think that's a great example of where we've had that public-private collaboration. You know, there's money been available from central government. We've worked together. Obviously, the application was led by the council, but it was led with support from the private sector. that private sector match funding has helped us present a real strong case, and in that case we've just got just over £1 million to reinvest in the rows. I think replicating that method could be a way of helping us to fund new initiatives in the city. And then a little bit more of an operational one is around the issues around empty units. Empty units, they're an eyesore, they damage the appearance of the city, they present an image that the city is decline, and often they'll fall into disrepair or misuse. Again, I think that could be addressed through some collaborative engagement with local landlords, letting agents, try and encourage them to leave long-term empty units in a presentable state, hoarding them, and using those frontages potentially as some promotional space in the city. I think helping businesses to navigate the planning, conservation and advertising regulations around that may be required, as well as some incentives and support with the cost of doing that work. But I think that cost will be offset by the benefit of not having empty units fall into disrepair in the city. The council have multiple empty premises within the city. You could use them to demonstrate how that could be done. The big good support on that process. We've got significant experience in doing this in other locations around Chester. But in the longer term, I think strategies to try and fill these empty units need to be prioritised. Working closely with agents and landlords to come up with more creative ways to address the challenges, things around rent levels, different types of rents and leases. Trying to overcome some of the challenges around the suitability of some of the premises within the city is needed. But again, I think, in the spirit of collaboration, I think that the bid can help facilitate some of those conversations and support the council in trying to do that. So that's me. Any questions, happy to take them, but hopefully that gives a good idea about what the bid's about and some opportunities where I see we could possibly collaborate going forward.
Thanks, Carl. I think I'll just bring Jane in quickly in case she's got anything to add, and then we'll move to questions if that's okay. Jane, have you got anything to add about that, or anything you want to add specifically about the experience in Northwich?
I can't hear Jane.
No, me neither. I'm struggling too. Are you there, Jane?
I can't see or hear her.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Right, sorry. Yeah, I was actually using this. I think that might be the problem, is the earphones, actually. I've just had to do it manually on the screen. So yeah, just to add to what Carl said, really, we've been operating the bid in Northwich since 2014. The bid's invested in the first 5-year period around 1.25 million into Northwich Town Centre. Our aspirations are very, very similar to Chester City Centre. That's what bids are all about. We have 325 bid members, some voluntary members, and anybody becomes bid member with over a rateable value of 6,000, so slightly smaller than Chester. We are predominantly made up of a good national offer and over 150 independents and professional business services, so we are quite a unique town centre, I feel. We also are a market town as well. So we've got some great opportunities within Northwich. I think in terms of COVID, a lot of our work has been around leading on the town centre recovery strategy. Since March, we've supported, there's been a whole host of business support provided to the bid members through the bid team in Northwich. We also utilised the Institute of Place Management 4-point recovery plan, so crisis, pre-recovery and recovery and sustainability, which our local councillors have been involved in. So Sam Naylor, the town centre councillor, and Andrew Cooper as well. Through that period, we've been developing significant marketing campaigns around, Northwich is a safe place to come, to come to, and to come and spend and come and shop and spend your leisure time. And we've also worked with Cheshire West and Chester Council through the Gold Cell recovery and also the High Street recovery cells. So I feel like that collaboration over the last 6 months has really been quite supportive for the Northwich bid. In terms of our successes through this 6-month period, I can report that footfall is back to where we were prior to lockdown. but that can go up and down, really dependent on the weather in Northwich. We're not a closed centre, so that can be an issue. Some of our businesses are reporting increases in sales, however, some are having a bad time. It's a really mixed bag at the moment. What has been really heartwarming in Northwich is the collaboration between businesses as well, and how they're trying to diversify. And the opening of independents and regional businesses in the town centre has been quite heartwarming as well. So we've had 3 openings in Barons Quay and 4 independents in the High Street. But we have seen the loss of Dorothy Perkins and New Look. Again, that doesn't seem to affect footfall at the moment, but I do get concerned, and I have mentioned this with Carl yesterday about the period that we're coming up to during, the autumn and winter. Our future risks are very, very similar to Carl. Our levy income could be affected. We are seeing levels of collection that are not the same as last year. And that has affected some of our project delivery within the town centre, specifically some of our funding around the greener, cleaner theme of our town centre. So we've had to reduce our funding towards the additional cleansing that we had with our partners, Northwich Town Council. National retailers are fragile. That is a concern for us. Another concern is, do we end up with a potential local lockdown or any future second wave? And then the other concern for us as well is the hospitality evening economy businesses throughout the winter months. At the moment, we have some very small businesses in the hospitality industry within Northwich who have taken up the opportunity of utilising the alfresco option. There's concerns around, will that continue to be successful throughout the winter months given the weather? And then the other issue that really is on our agenda is potentially, obviously, the end of the furlough scheme. Do we see redundancies within the local area? And again, lack of disposable income for consumers to spend within the town centre. But we do see a lot of opportunity. So collaboration, partnership working, considerable business support between the bid team and officers at the local authority. I think helping businesses to react to any future government advice on being COVID compliant and support around diversifying, particularly in digital skills, I think would be incredibly supportive to Northwich. We are looking at introducing the Purple Flag accreditation in Northwich in the next 18 months as well. And we are working with officers around this communal space that's being brought forward where the outdoor market was. And I've been speaking to officers this morning about what that looks like in the future and how the bid could add value around enhancing that offer by people being able to order drinks, food, product, and utilise that space in the future around a digital app. And that's really it from me. I'm happy to take questions like Carl.
Okay, members of the commission, has anybody got any questions they want to ask? To start with, Sam D, you've put your hand up, so if you would like to go first.
Yeah, I was very interested in what Jane said about the workforce. I think the workforce wasn't mentioned up until that point, and I just wondered, are people finding it hard to recruit? Do you think they'll be letting people go after the furlough period? Are the new businesses that are opening, are they one-man bands, or are they employing staff? And are the businesses that are going, are they the ones that are big employers? And then the second point I just wanted to make was about the difference between footfall and consumer spend, because footfall doesn't necessarily mean that people are spending a lot. And I just wondered how it was working out that the footfall might be the same, but how much are they actually spending, and can you measure that?
Sam, I can say that in Northwich it's a mixed bag. People are coming in to spend, they're not browsing, but there are some businesses that are reporting that they're doing incredibly well. particularly the hospitality throughout August with the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. And some of our businesses have chosen to continue with that because it was so successful. But it really is a mixed bag out there. And I completely agree with you. We've always said it's nice to have the footfall back to where it was prior to lockdown. We are still 7% down on last year. But actually, it's about what people spend in the till. But what I can say is people are not browsing. That's the feedback that I'm getting.
Yeah, same from us really. I think there is no one measure of consumer spend within the city. A lot of it is anecdotal, and it does vary from business to business. But yeah, I think in terms of the businesses that we've lost, although they were chains, we haven't really lost one of the big major employers within the city yet. That is our fear, really. I think us as especially in Chester, we have a number of larger retailers, and the risk, the risk for us is that we lose one of them. Between those larger retailers on Foregate Street alone, we're probably close to 1,000 plus staff. To lose one of them would be a significant loss for Chester. So that is probably our biggest worry at the moment, knowing the circumstances that we're in. A lot of those national chains, obviously, there won't necessarily be a huge amount of focus on Chester. Chester will probably be a line on a spreadsheet somewhere. They will look at the profitability of that store, and if it's making money, that will go in its favour. If it's not, it will probably be earmarked for closure. So I think having a way of measuring that consumer spend, comparing that to footfall, some of that general, some of that general data around how the city is performing is a challenge. I think, if it was something that we come up with a method of actually measuring that, I think that would be useful for all involved, really, as a way of sort of understanding exactly how the city's performing.
Yeah, I think our landscape as well, Sam, if you think about Northwich, we are surrounded by supermarkets, and supermarkets are doing incredibly well at the moment. And how I feel about it is, I was in Northwich yesterday, and the car parks next to the police station and the business centre were half empty. And I feel that that's because we've still not got workers from the professional business services working in the town centre yet. So car parks were half empty there. I do feel like Carl, what Carl's saying, we really need to be mindful of professional business services that have been operating within towns and city centres and what their feelings are for the future. Are they going to want office space? They found that they could, within 48 hours, mobilise their workforces at home and operate probably more productively. And it's how we encourage those professional business services back into our high streets and city centres, I think.
Okay, thank you both. I think Sam Naylor, then Charles, and then Lynn.
Thanks, Chair. Jane mentioned a very important word as far as I was concerned, and that's collaboration. The relationship between various agencies years ago, before I came on the council, apparently were not all that strong. But what we've done over certainly the last 5 years since the bid came to town, in effect, is that we enjoy a really positive relationship between the bid, the town council, and all the other agencies as well, Cheshire West and Chester, Rotarians, and we all speak as one, and we're determined to get the town centre back up and running and successful again. So I think that is one of the main ingredients. It's this kind of strong, cohesive partnership approach, and it's one of our biggest assets, I think.
Yeah, just to echo that from our perspective, we still do have disagreements with the local authority. We never agree on everything. I'm sure Sam and Richard can sort of vouch for that. But I think, yeah, I agree completely. In recent years, we're very fortunate on our board. Andrew Lewis agreed to join us, Chief Executive. So I think that has strengthened that relationship. The contact that we have locally with Richard in particular, we speak quite often. We're on a number of different, working on a number of different projects very closely. I could phone up Richard, you know, this afternoon, and I know that he would answer me and take my call, which is probably something that has built up in recent years, and you know, hopefully that trust and relationship between both parties has sort of developed. So yeah, again, I sort of echo that, and you know, I understand from our perspective, as a bid perspective, obviously we need to work with the local authority. We need that relationship to be strong, and like I say, we're never always going to agree, but as long as we can have an open, honest and sensible conversation about things, I think that's as much as we can hope for.
Yeah, I think as well, Carl, your you know, what you were saying was really important before around being able to work collectively together, you know, CH1 and Northwich. We've had lots of conversations about us collaborating with partners, and also the Cheshire and Warrington LEP, because I think the LEP have really started to appreciate, and Marketing Cheshire, the importance of the bids across Cheshire, West and Chester through this 6-month period. You know, it's been quite heartwarming to see the collaborative work between us all.
Yeah, and I think it is worth noting, again, Jane and I were chatting yesterday, you know, Cheshire West, we got 5 bids. We got 5 bids in Cheshire West and
yeah,
Chester area.
Yeah, we've got 3 business parks, a town centre and a city centre, haven't we? So yeah, we've got 5 bids. And I was saying to Carl yesterday, outside of London, I think Cheshire West has got the most concentrated area of bids. And I think that's something to really shout about, that, you know, the investment that it's bringing, the people that are employed within those bid areas, the businesses that operate there. And I think our retailers would tell you that the collaboration between the bids and Cheshire West and Chester Council, particularly those independents who obviously went into shock in lockdown, that support, that business support that we gave in making sure that they'd applied for their grant to the local authority from government was just, you know, the feedback we've had has just been phenomenal, and you know, and the independents really appreciate how quickly the council responded to that as well.
I think it's really nice to hear that, and I hope the officers, I know Steph Ramsden is on this call, I know how hard her team worked to support different people during those first couple of weeks when all this is happening, and getting the business rate grants and everything paid out. And it's nice to get positive feedback from you both about that, and I hope the officers who are on the call who are involved in it will pass it on to their colleagues as well. Charles, you're next.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I very much welcome what both Carl and Jane have said. I think the bids work very well. Where I work on Cadbrook Park is one of the 3 business park bids that Jane just referred to, and I think that what's particularly good about them is that it allows a more localized solution, and I think it is something that if we were thinking of potential recommendations, that certainly that all localities might well want to think about a bid. And I think the benefits for them, as has just been said, I think are very good indeed. I mean, it's often been looked at as quite a large area, but I do think that where you've got a bit of a critical mass, that we could look at smaller areas. There's a potential. We're looking at a feasibility study of one within a relatively small area in my ward, but it's actually fixing something that is absolutely crucial to that community area, and effectively it's a community car park, for want of a better phrase. But I've been looking into it for a number of years, and this is the only viable solution that I can see to it, because once a bid is in there, the good thing about it is that once you've got the majority of the shops and the rateable values, you're in a position by which you can get on and do stuff, and you're not relying on 24, 30, 60, 100 people all having to say yes, because that's unfortunately where it falls down. So I think the bids are very good. I mean, the comment was made about office workers, and again, with my day job, what we are seeing in relation to office lettings is that we've, over the last couple of months, it's been very, very busy on our office agency side of things. And it's not necessarily people wanting a new office, it's they're wanting to move office. They're wanting to find something that's locked down, compliant, on the assumption that all of this may well happen again. What is quite interesting is certainly the feedback that we're getting when I speak to other professionals is that I think, you know, more and more people are working from home, but quite a lot of people still do see the need and the basis for having some form of office. And whilst there might be less people in it, actually they need the same amount of space because of social distancing. And I think we need to be able to think about that. And I also think, actually, quite frankly, as a council, we need to think about that. Our default option as a council is that every council worker should be working from home unless there's a reason to come into the office. And at some point, I really think that we need to switch that about. And I appreciate PPAE and health and safety and all of that. And we have to be a responsible employer. But I think where we have got office facilities within town and city centres, you know, I think we may need to set an example and have a think about that, because commercial occupiers, tenants on the retail side, they ain't just going to be making a decision on a spreadsheet. That spreadsheet will involve their retail sales, and their retail sales rely on people going into the town and city centres. And that's not just shoppers, it's office workers as well. So, I mean, that's slightly beyond what we can do in relation to our recommendation today, but I just thought I might make that comment when there's a member of the cabinet present. But I do think it's something we do need to consider. But yeah, I mean, I think bids are very good, and I think if we can potentially look at expanding the range and the number that we've got within Cheshire West, I think that would be a very good idea.
I think, I think John Adlin's going to talk about office space and co-working space in the next bit. So there's some good points that you've raised there, Charles. Councillor Gibbon, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Richard. 3 points. I was interested in the image side of things that was brought up by Chester, and collaboration with landlords so that properties don't go into disrepair. I would like to know if there's been any conversations on that and how the landlords have responded to that question for going forward. And also, I think the different types of leases and the renting opportunities, because of the change in the types of businesses and independence to get them going, I think that would be a really positive way forward. On the I was interested to see that in Northwich we'd had a recovery and marketing campaign, Safe Place to Visit. I wondered where that had gone, because I've not seen anything like that, and I live in Northwich, you know, on the surrounding area of Northwich, and I've not seen that, so I'd be interested to know where that is promoted. On the digital skills side, I think that is very important, not only for the shop owners and the employees and the business owners, but also if the furlough ends and people have got to change direction for their recruitment needs, are we working closely with the LEP and with the council on promoting the government offers of new training that's coming through? So I would like to know that that is getting to the people that would need it to take that forward. Those are my 3 areas. Thank you.
I'll just come in on the first point there with regards to engagement with landlords. You know, conversations have taken place with landlords. It does seem it is mainly on a sort of case by case basis. We as the bid, we've had a number of projects where we've there was the old BHS unit in the city centre that had obviously fallen into a state of disrepair, so we were able to work with the landlord there to get that hoarded off. We've covered that initially with some promotional material promoting some of the local independent businesses in Chester. More recently, we've recovered that with some sort of post-COVID positive messages, welcome back to Chester, maintain social distancing and the like. But it is very much on a sort of case-by-case basis, and I think what I would be pushing for there is a bit more of a coordinated approach. Obviously, a lot of these premises are often left, you know, the ones that come under listed building status, the the business rate for empty units, the rules for listed buildings is slightly different, is my understanding. Therefore, it doesn't necessarily cost a property owner an awful lot of money to leave that property to basically just sit there empty, and they're able to just sit on these types of premises. And obviously this is where we have these long-term empty units that fall into disrepair. So I think if there was a little bit more creative way, you know, I don't know if there is rules within, you know, conservation or planning legislation, things where we can put requirements on landlords or property owners that leave a premises empty, that, you know, after say 3 months, there is a requirement that that building needs to be hoarded, or barriered off, or at least, you know, the appearance, so that, you know, that any empty windows need to be vinyled, just to improve the appearance of that. So I think that's something, but a little bit more of a coordinated approach, a bit more of a blanket approach to all premises within the city, rather than that sort of individual case-by-case basis. I think is ideally what we would be looking for if that was doable.
Yes, I would support that, because I know, for instance, Nationwide Building Society in Northwich, they left. That's still the same now. You look through the window and there's a load of rubbish all on the floor and everything. So for a National Building Society like that, to leave the premises like that, to me is not good. And if we could do something like that, where you cover the windows at least, and, you know, it looks decent as you walk past, I think that would be a good way forward in the interim for finding a new tenant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
The property that you refer to, Lynn, I believe just before lockdown there was a deal done on that property. Whether that has gone by the wayside now. The issue sometimes we have with empty property is actually engaging the landlord in Northwich and actually getting permissions from them as well to be able to do things. So, you know, we can't just keep, you know, go and put vinyls up, which we'd love to do. And Sam and I were on a walk around about 3 or 4 weeks ago around the town centre council in Ayla, and we were looking at shop frontages, and Carphone Warehouse left the town centre to move up to the retail park, and actually they'd actually covered their building in some really nice slick vinyls. And I said to Sam, that is what we need to aspire to in Northwich. Now, that we can do that and we can engage with landlords again. The concern is around cost and our income over the next, you know, 12, 18 months, and what that's going to look like, because obviously these things really don't come cheap. But I do support the aspiration that we need to have a consistent approach across the town centre on shop frontages. In answer to your question around the Northwich Together campaign and the safety messages, so that campaign has been running now since May. It's been running across social media profiles. It's been in the local paper. We've had graphics made, and we also had social distancing materials made for the businesses in Northwich. So we had about 100 businesses who took those materials. So they were shop floor vinyls. So keep your distance, be kind and keep your distance. There was counter stands. There was how many maximum occupancy in your shop, and I actually did a one-to-many event in the town centre and handed these materials out to the businesses in Northwich. So that campaign, like I say, has been running since May. It continues to run, and I've signed off a second phase of that project as well in the last few days. So we're all about giving the consumer confidence to come back into Northwich, because it's a safe place to come and do your shopping and spend your leisure time.
Good. Thanks, Jane. Steph Ramsden, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in on a point?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to the point around training and digital skills. So we've been working really closely with the LEP and other colleagues across the sub-region in conjunction with Bays as well. So there is a comprehensive skills programme run through the Accelerate scheme via the LEP and the Growth Hub. So currently employed people are able to access that. We're working with all of the employers within the network to signpost people towards that. There's also an online tool that's being promoted via DWP that the LEP again have enabled, which is free training for any unemployed people to upskill their own digital skills. So there will be ongoing campaigns pushing that out. Again, we're using existing channels and making sure that we maximise that. I think with colleagues through Marketing Cheshire, we have engaged with all of their members and also people who aren't members to enhance some of their digital skills and enable some online trading to support their existing businesses. And that will only grow going forward. So I think it's about how they promote themselves better, maybe make themselves more efficient. So just to reassure you, Lynn, there are lots of channels around digital skills, capitalising on existing funding and existing schemes. It's just getting that message out.
Yeah, I think that's the work that we've been.
I wondered what the take up was then. If it's been pushed like that, what's the take up? Is it slow?
I think that's something we can come back in terms of the level of engagement. I think, like all of these things, we've had some really proactive, really early adopters, specifically through the council's business support that we launched mid-COVID, and that was using the Chamber of Commerce and also an existing supplier to the council to do some of those online webinars and support. I think we've probably had around 400 businesses engage, whether that's one business engaging more than once, but I can get more details on that for you and circulate it to the group afterwards.
I've actually attended some of those sessions. I wanted to see what they were like, and they were really, really good. It was I did one on Instagram marketing. It was really interesting. Yeah. I've got a question. Just I'm conscious of time. You'll have picked up Jane and Carl. You'll have picked up at the start. The first agenda item was about where we go from here and what the output of the commission is. And I suppose, Carl, thank you for your kind words. And I think you and I have been through multiple series of different meetings and formats and different ways of trying to manage things in the city centre. And I also attend the meetings that Northwich Town Council, Northwich Bid and Cheshire West and Chester have as well. And I've kind of watched those in my cabinet role over the last year to try and it is different in different areas, and that you need different people from different places because there are unique things going on. And I suppose out of this, I want to get to a situation where we can almost reduce the number of meetings that some people have to attend, but the meetings that people do attend and all of the different organisations that go are part of a structured framework of work which is measured and which is being done for a specific reason. So in this commission, we've learned about lots and lots of places and lots of ideas about how town centre groups have said, right, well, this is our footfall now, this is where we want it to be, or this is our consumer spend if we can find a way to measure it, and this is where we want it to be. And these are the tools that we've got in our arsenal to try and make that better. So let's say it's that we want to have a more welcoming place because we're going to have less shop fronts that look like they're empty shops. Who's going to be responsible for finding out who the landlord is for that property and communicating with them? And it goes with an action associated with the bid or with the council or whoever it is that's going to be relevant. But at least then everybody would know whose responsibility is what. Everybody would know where the boundaries of everybody's ability as an organisation is. And every town centre would have this plan that we were all working on collectively that met the kind of thinking that we've seen about in these place management and the High Street Task Force and the Plate Management of Institute Place Management. Do you think, given your roles and the interactions that you've had with the council over the year and other organisations that work in our town centre and the city centre, do you think that that's a good outcome for this commission to have kind of framework that we could all work towards in a coordinated way?
Yeah, it would certainly be an ambition. I know the phrase, Team Chester has been mentioned repeatedly, and like I say, I think it goes back to that point I made previously. It's more about we as stakeholders within the city, the bid or the council. We can't run people's business for them, but we need to be able to create that infrastructure. We need to be able to put that support in place. So when a business does have an issue, there is a method. There is a process where we can look to get that addressed. I think initially when we went into lockdown, I was part of I was sitting on the goal command structure meetings that Steph was leading on. And one of the things that I was really impressed with there was the speed and the ability in which we could raise an issue, it would be escalated, and we would get a decision and it would be dealt with. I think if we can get anything replicating that method, and the same applies with the high street cells that have been set up to look at specific locations, I think if we can replicate that method and we have that infrastructure in place, so if we have an issue, we can there is a location, there is one place we can take it, it can be escalated and it can be addressed. I think if anything could come out of that, out of this whole process, I think that would be a real positive, because one of the challenges we face at the moment is where do we escalate these issues to? Who has responsibility for these issues? Half the time is spent trying to find out who do you talk to about some of these problems that businesses are encountering. So yeah, 100%. If that is something that could come out of this process, that would be really, really beneficial to us and to our members.
Councillor Dixon, you had your hand up for a second. Jane, did you want to come in on any of those points?
No, I can completely agree with Carl. I think what you're talking about the framework, some of that has already started to happen because of our response to COVID through the cell groups that Carl's just talked about. And you do raise an issue and within a matter of a few days it's sorted out. But I wouldn't want that to discontinue. I think we need to build on that and develop on it for the future.
It's funny, Councillor Dixon and I were having this exact conversation. I'll let you come in, Sam. I could see you were about to speak.
I was actually going to ask Carl and Jane very quickly. There's a good relationship in Chester, a good relationship in Northwich. There isn't a bid in Ellesmere Port, but you both probably look at it. And what would you recommend from your perspective? What would the framework look like over there?
They need a bid. One liner.
You line yourself up for a job, Jane.
Oh, well, I don't want to sell groundwork services, but we'd be very happy to do your feasibility study. Yeah.
Carl, I think the bids are a model. You've got to. There's a careful balance with bids, though. When you obviously the way that they are set up, the way that they're structured, obviously the amount of income that they can potentially generate will dictate whether a bid is the right model or not. And I think that's the balance. And somewhere like Ellesmere Port, some of the smaller satellite towns, it is difficult to generate enough revenue from a bid to actually make it effective. Otherwise, you just end up with an organisation that essentially just sits there and pays for itself. It's got no money to actually do anything. And I think that potentially you end up running into problems. So like Jane, I think a bid is the default solution. It's worked in Northwich, it works in Chester. Ellesmere Port, there probably is a bit of a feasibility study to be done. Chester bid would be happy to do that. I'm not sure if I don't want to steal any work off Jane, but for a small fee, I'd be happy to do it. I think all those satellite towns, it's something worth considering. If not, some sort of semi-formalised structure, even just a local high street cell for Ellesmere Port.
I think that's right.
Potentially could be an option. You wouldn't necessarily have that financial backing that a bid could bring, but I think just having that cell structure, I think does work for locations. So
I think Sam, picking Ellesmere Port is quite key actually, because for a bid to work in Ellesmere Port, you'd really want to have a joint. It would really need to cover Cheshire Oaks, and then you look at Cheshire Oaks and you think, I have met with Kenny Murray and to discuss bids over the last 2 years, and actually they have service charge implications over at Cheshire Oaks. So you go to Cheshire Oaks and it's a destination in its own right. What could a bid provide to Cheshire Oaks that would kickstart what's going on in the town centre, in the traditional high street? So Ellesmere Port for a bid's perspective is probably a little bit of a challenge, but it would depend on what the potential income for Ellesmere Port. We've also looked at Winsford town centre, but also looking at a bigger geography of Winsford, because there's quite a lot of independence across the town, not just within the precinct. And there's the business, the supermarkets up the other way. So it is the model where you can guarantee in normal circumstances, outside of a pandemic, that your income's going to be there for 5 years, you know. But at the moment, Carl and I have got some pretty big challenges around income at the moment.
And we all. Right. So I think we're going to have to move on. I'm sorry to cut you short there. I think we're going to run out of time for the next set of speakers. Otherwise, look, can I just say thank you so much for coming and taking part in the discussion in such an open way and giving us your thoughts on stuff. The Commission's got a couple more meetings, and then we'll be reporting back. I think in October or November, and it would be really. I'd be really up for both of you kind of having a look at what the final report is and giving us any feedback, if that would be good with both of you. Okay. Great. You're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the meeting. There's a couple of other speakers, some independents from Northwich, as I say, John Adlin from the LEP and Heather Stanbridge from Cushman and Wakefield, talking about offices and co-working space, which I know has come up in the meetings, and then Karen Bates, our market manager, talk about our market. So please do stay if you wish to, but if you've got other things to do, we totally understand. Okie dokes. Right. So the Coffee House is a business which opened in Barons Quay, which is one of the council's regeneration projects. We were going to have somebody who's just opened a restaurant in Chester, one of the new businesses that's opened, but unfortunately they've got caught up. But we're lucky to have Chris, who I think I recognise Chris's name because I think it's one of those things where you're a councillor and you get quoted in a press release, and I think we were both in one together, but we've never met. But the press release made it sound like we'd known each other for years. So, Chris, nice to meet you. I suppose we're interested today in hearing about what you think about, you know, the recovery, what it's been like for your business. I know you opened quite recently, thinking about it. I can't remember when that press release was, but I'm sure you can introduce that, and then perhaps if you want to talk about your business, talk about your experience, and then members of the Commission can ask questions. That would be fantastic. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I know that I've come to the quite late, and we've actually only really arrived in Northwich over the last few months. We opened back in February, and we were closed obviously quite quickly. So within only 3 or 4 weeks of having opened that store, we've closed down. Just a little bit of background about our business, and I don't want to bore you too much because it's nearly 9 years ago since we opened the stores. But it's owned by there's two of us. There's myself and my brother. We started out originally in a location in Lim, and we had these wonderful ideas that we were going to change the way that people eat, drink and relax in their local communities. And we're only 22, 23, 24 at the time, so we were extremely naive, and we'd yet to sort of like face any real business issues or any issues in life potentially. But you know, fast forward sort of like 9 years since then, we've now opened Northwich was our 6th store that opened, and we're just in the process. We were building a store while we were in lockdown. We were committed over in Bootle to another location, and we're carrying on. I mean, we're very, very optimistic about what the future can hold. I mean, and not everyone is quite as optimistic as what we are. But we've seen some wonderful things even since reopening. And just to say, I think there's been a couple of comments already that stand out. I think that as you're sort of like growing a business, I think that there's a number of different challenges that you have at various different stages, and they change year by year. And as you sort of like, well, we've found as we've kind of grown. And I think one of the hardest things that we ever had was actually going from 1 location to 2 locations, because even though it doesn't really feel like a massive jump when you look from the outside and go, a company's got 2 stores, it's actually, well, actually you're kind of growing your business double in size, which is, at the time, it's massively disruptive. And I think there was some comments earlier on about, for businesses, independent businesses, sort of like having this day-to-day operating issues. I think maybe Carl said, you know, things that they struggle with like that. And then on the other scale of it, obviously, as you get bigger, you do get less nimble, and you can't change things quite as fast, and you can't necessarily react to what's going on in local areas. Or, you know, say we're running campaigns now across multiple sites, it's like, well, our hands are slightly tied because we can't necessarily, what we do for one, maybe we do have to do for others. But just before we went into lockdown, I mean, so the store that we opened in Barons Quay, it is probably the largest store that we have. And it was serving an incredible amount of people. I mean, we've had a fantastic response from it. I mean, in those opening kind of couple of weekends, it was around about 1,000 to 1,200 customers a day, something along those lines. So, you know, for us, we've only had really good experience in Northwich Town Centre. I mean, it took us a very long time to be able to do the deal with Barons Quay and get in there. Then post-COVID, I mean, we obviously had that news that we were going to be closing down middle of March. Yeah, that was a little bit of a shock, and we very quickly had to go into a mindset of, well, how do we protect the business? Then we got fantastic news that obviously the furlough scheme was going to be available, so we were able to protect all of our staff in the first instance, and that was one of the first worries. Well, if we end up locking down and we find ourselves in a situation where we have to let staff go, well, you can't suddenly, we employ close to 100 now, you can't suddenly find 100 members of staff, have them retrained and ready to run your business the day that you're told to reopen. So being able to put all those individuals safely under one umbrella, keep them ready and poised to reopen the business was essential. We were also very lucky with our rateable values to being able to benefit from, I think it's been mentioned already, quite a number of the schemes. I mean, all of our properties managed to be rates free throughout this period, which has been a lifesaver. I mean, we've had good experience. We're across, I think it is probably, well, 5 local authorities, and all local authorities got support to us really quickly. And we, within sort of like a month or so of going through that lockdown, we actually found ourselves being feeling a lot more comfortable about the future, and our focus then started to change towards, okay, so how do we get out of this? And when the time comes that we need to welcome people back to our stores, what do we need to be doing to ensure customers can come back with some comfort and confidence that they're safe places to be? So the only thing we've coming back out of COVID is we've reduced all of the capacities in our stores. And I think there was a comment earlier about weather and everyone making use of al fresco dining. So I think it is going to get slightly more interesting when we get towards the October, November kind of weathers, and probably our outside areas start to become less usable. I think it will become a bit of a problem, and we will obviously suffer with capacity slightly. So we're very, very, very optimistically hoping that there's going to be some kind of treatment or vaccine at some point, which obviously takes this problem away. But in the meantime, we've just got to battle through and get there. I think that there was a mention about the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. That has been honestly the most amazing thing that could have happened for not only our industry, but also the whole high street in general. And there's always with these things a number of individuals that, you know, will say things negative towards these things. I mean, it's been pandemonium in some cases in some of our stores. Some record numbers have come through like you've never seen. And stores that we've had for nearly 9 years, particularly the one in Lim, had a record month last month through what was going on with Eat Out to Help Out. But the main thing that it did is it actually encouraged people to come back to the high streets. And it's quite reassuring to hear that the footfall numbers are starting to get comparable, because this is what we're finding across all of our sites. Apart from, there was another mention to do with local lockdowns. 2 of our stores are sat in local lockdown in Trafford, and those are real problems, albeit only 20% down, which I think is still quite good considering people aren't supposed to be going into their high streets and socialising maybe as much as they are. But yeah, so I think that that's one thing to be worried about. But as a whole, look, you know, we've got another store opening in November. We're about to exchange contracts in Runcorn. We're looking at sites at the moment in Altrincham, Warrington, and we think that if you can get past this period that we're in now, that there's actually a lot of really positive opportunities out there for all kinds of businesses, particularly ours. Just one thing about why we ended up in coffee. My background is I was in retail, and I was at the time, before we started the coffee house, I was running an online musical instrument retail company. It wasn't my company, I was working for somebody running their online element. We had bricks and mortar stores, and we could see that the damage that the online was doing to the bricks and mortar stores as things were starting to shift. And this was over 10 years ago now. So when we decided to start a business, we decided it had to be something that you couldn't buy online. And the one thing you can't buy online is an experience of going out and sitting in a coffee shop, eating and drinking. So that's why we've kind of ended up for our sins in coffee shops and whatever else. But the real challenges are about what can be done to keep, I think, to balance that online activity and the offline activity, and to try and ensure that some of this footfall stays on our high streets, because we don't want to see the high streets go. I don't think anyone does.
No.
But yeah, I think open to questions. I mean, I've just tried to give a brief overview of what our experience has been over the last few months. Not gone too much into the boring details about our past, but if you've got any questions, then I'm happy to try and answer. But really new to Northwich, obviously.
Thanks, Chris. It was really good to hear that, and you know, I've used the help scheme, help app scheme as well. I think it's been really good. Has any of the other panel members got any questions they want to ask, or I'll ask one. My question. Oh, Councillor Gibbon, you go first.
Oh, it's okay. It's very good to hear from you, Chris, like that. That's quite a positive perspective. What do you think we could do to help you further in relation to Northwich? What do you think? Is there anything we could do? Are we doing the most we can, or is there anything have we missed an opportunity that we could help a little further with your business and the other businesses?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I've been asked that kind of question. I mean, I don't sit on many of these commissions, but like we've had local kind of business meetings and business groups over the years in places like Lymm and Sale and various things like that we've attended. And I think it's a really difficult thing to try and come up with a one-size-fits-all solution to businesses' issues and problems that they may be experiencing, because I've found that everybody has a totally different perspective on what they need and what works and whatever else. And I think maybe Carl said earlier on that obviously the council can't come in and run our businesses, and neither could a bid or anything like that. I think that, like I said at the beginning, you go through various stages when you open a business, and then as you're starting to get into this kind of period of more predictable success, of challenges. I mean, it's a constant moving goalpost from a central perspective, where your wages are generally changing on an annual basis. Your business rates can change throughout periods. There's a lot of talk about rents and things like that, and that's more of a private problem for people to negotiate with landlords and to know exactly what they think their business needs to be paying for a property before they enter it. I think one of the things I can say is that our last property that we opened was over in Highton, and we've had an incredibly good experience with Knowsley Council over there. Extremely proactive in the work that they've been doing, and I'll give you a little bit of background to it. So when me and Steve look for properties, we're a little bit different to maybe how a few of the other businesses are. So we try and find locations whereby our offer can potentially add something to the area. So like as an example, so we opened in Highton, and I mean, we've got one in Highton, we've got one in Partington, we're in Sale, Lymm, Highton, then Northwich, then we're off to Bootle, we're off to Runcorn. And some of these areas, some people will have said, without sounding, maybe they were a bit snobby, but why are you off to these areas, was the question we could sometimes get. So the answer to that is that actually me and Steve really favour these areas where we feel we can make a difference. So when we turned up in Highton, I mean, Highton, I don't know how many people have been down Highton's High Street recently, but, you know, it's not the prettiest of high streets, and, you know, it's kind of what you consider one of the forgotten about high streets. And the council found out that we were interested in taking a property there, and they arranged a meeting and they asked us to come in and see them. And they said to us, they sat there with a drawing of the high street, and they said, ideally, where would you like to be? And we said, well, look, there's these 2 units here that we know are owned by the same landlord, but we're struggling to agree terms with them. They're like, well, why are you struggling to agree terms? It's like, well, because of that dilapidated and in such need of work, it's like we can't afford as a business to take on that whole project, amalgamate these 2 units together, and then spend the money to put our coffee shop in there as well. So, I mean, they went away, they came back, and they said, well, what if we were to acquire these units, do some of the enabling works? Also, we've got this this fund available at the moment whereby we want to invest in shop fronts, which is kind of similar to some of the things we talked about here. You know, what if you then became a tenant for us? So sort of like within 6 months after that, we'd ended up opening this store. It's a 1,300 square foot store. They bought the units. read it. I mean, if you looked at the shop fronts from the outside, if you were not to know you're in Highton and just look at the frontage with these 5-6 units that have redeveloped, you could imagine it being on any high street, and particularly very, very nice ones and very expensive ones. So I think that, you know, councils potentially, from what we experience in Knowsley, they're definitely thinking outside the box and maybe taking on some of these problem units if it's potentially possible, and then attracting the right kind of tenant, especially if it's an independent one, could really work. But I mean, we're fortunate. We're past some of the earlier challenges of a business, of what some businesses experience. But I'm not really sure, to answer your question. It's like,
I actually, that was really, really useful, to be honest, Chris. I think there's some really good ideas in there, and I know you've got your hand up as well. And I think, you know, I know there's people making notes about this, and obviously it's been recorded, but I think some of the ideas that you've talked about there in other councils is definitely stuff that we should be looking at here. Lynn, did you have another question, or was your hand just
basically up? What he was saying, it took 6 months to get that done. How long did it take you to get in Barons Quay?
Quite a bit. Like, you know, it took longer. But, you know, it's so. I think our first interest in Northwich was nearly 3 years ago, approximately. And at the time when we first, so our method of trying to find locations is very much go down and get yourself on the high street and try and work out where the footfall's going to be. And one of the things that's different is that we're a new business. I mean, we're 9 years old, but we're only recently expanding over this last 4 or 5 years. So if you think our main competitor, I don't put ourselves in the same bracket necessarily as all the smaller independent coffee shops. When we turn up now on a high street, potentially our main competitor really is like Costa Coffee, Starbucks, Cafe Nero, and those kind of individuals. So when these kind of businesses turned up maybe 10, 15 years ago, because that's how long, if you take the Costa in Northwich, the one down where our street is, it's like that, they've probably been there 15 years. And at the time, that might be in a good spot, or maybe not a good spot if they got the wrong spot. But what I'm trying to say is that the epicenters of towns have changed. Which is potentially some of the problems that I think town centres are having. They're continually going through these redevelopments, and by doing so, they end up actually creating these voids of really bad areas in their town centres. Things like out of town retail parks do it all the time, where they end up dragging tenants right out of the middle of your town centre, massive voids, so that you can end up with a nice M&S food hall, I don't know, 2 miles down the road or something like that. So it did take us a lot longer. And when we first turned up, the tenant that I think you were supposed to be getting, and I might be wrong, but was going to be Starbucks, so certainly they were penciled in to be in the unit that we've ended up in.
No, I think it was Valerie Patisserie, wasn't it?
Well, I'm talking even earlier than that. Yeah, so
right, okay.
So nearly 3 years ago, when the scheme was being built, I believe that Starbucks were on the cards to potentially be taking that unit. But we weren't going to get chosen. You got to remember, we're a small business. We didn't have the strength of covenant to be demanding that kind of unit at all. And then further down the line, then when Starbucks were off the table, then we were negotiating again, and then Patisserie Valerie turned up, which you're right about. So then obviously they were a much bigger business than us, and then unfortunately they went into administration. So we were maybe the last option. Like nice.
The last and the best, Chris. The last and the best.
Yeah, I was going to say saving the best till last, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just conscious of time.
That's interesting. Thanks, Chris, for that update. Thank you.
That's all right.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of time. Has anybody got any other questions for Chris? Or Chris, would you like to stay and carry on with the conversation as the other parts of this section emerge? But I'm just conscious we've only got 40 minutes left, and we've still got at least 2 other speakers. So will you stay with us, Chris?
Yeah, I'll hang around. Yeah, sure.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to introduce John and Heather now. As I say, John I know from the Enterprise Board, because he's on the Enterprise Zone Board, and he's on the LEP, and Heather is from Cushman and Wakefield. So I'll hand over to you, and away you go.
Okay. Do you want me to go first?
Go for it, John.
Yes, I'm John Adlin. I'm the Growth Director at Cheshire and Warrington LEP. I look after all of the LEP's land and property programmes and place-based programmes. So, as Councillor Beecham said, I look after the Enterprise Zone. I also work on the Sub-Regional Housing Board, and also look after growth corridors more broadly. I think what I wanted to kind of do just to set some context really around office space demand and in light of COVID and the impact that kind of has on our town and city centres. I think really there's kind of the three big kind of trends that COVID has exacerbated. So three trends that were happening anyway that have just been really accelerated by COVID. And the first of those was the shift from bricks and mortar retail to online retail. And that's been picked up in various conversations this afternoon. The second is the kind of shift to home working. And then the third were kind of concerns that people had around sustainability, impact on the environment and work-life balance. And I think COVID has really impacted and accelerated those three trends. And what I want to say is those three trends were happening anyway. COVID hasn't made those trends happen. They were already happening. What it's done is really accelerated those trends. So, the shift to homework, and organisations were already starting to look at homework. And I know Cheshire West Council already had a number of staff working at home 1 or 2 days a week, even pre-COVID, in terms of kind of reducing your office footprint. So that was happening anyway. We've just accelerated that massively, literally overnight with the lockdown. Organisations had to switch straight away to shifting all of the staff to, or most of the staff to home working. That's obviously had that, and the kind of shift to kind of bricks and mortar retail and kind of online has kind of impacted on town centres. There was kind of some broader trends happening as well over the last few years, in that shift of retail dominating high streets and town centres. We were already starting to look at how we diversified our town centres. So we were looking towards employment, towards offices, to fill that gap left behind by some of the retail that was closing and moving out, and also residential as another aspect of trying to kind of diversify town centres. So that the trends that have been happening anyway before COVID. And then I think the other trend that was kind of happening over the last 10, 15 years has been the shift back to city centres and town centres for offices from out of town business parks. So again, we were starting to see that shift anyway. I think people were realising that out of town business parks, they're all sprung up in the 80s and 90s, were probably not the answer. People wanted to be back into town and city centres to get that fuller experience, that ability to shop, to socialise, etc. So I think that I wanted to kind of set those kind of broad trends that COVID has kind of accelerated and exacerbated a lot of that. I think what we're starting to see at the LEP, and what we're starting to kind of pick up really, is that that home working genie is very much out of the bottle now. And when you look at some of the surveys recently, I think one I looked at last week, 9 out of 10 office workers have said they don't want to go back to the office 5 days a week. So there's certainly that. I think what we've realised now is that we've got the technology, we've got the ability to work at home. There's been a lot of studies coming out over the last few weeks showing that productivity has increased amongst professionals and office workers. I think one study I saw last week predicted or suggested there was a 13% increase in productivity across a range of sectors from people working at home, and even just simple things like not doing that kind of 2-hour commute a day into Manchester or Liverpool city centres or wherever your office is based, is kind of helping people with their work-life balance. I think what I would say is that is not evenly spread across all office workers. So not all office workers are equal, and not all office workers either want to or can work at home. So I think your experience of working at home is very different. If you've got young children and you've been trying to homeschool them and you've been trying to work at home, that's extremely different than my experience, where I've got a daughter at university and I don't need to worry about her too much. She's not coming in every 5 minutes asking to be fed. Well, she probably is actually, but I think and also if you've got the space to homework, I'm lucky. I've got a dedicated home office. I was talking to someone the other week who was stuck in a 1-bedroom flat in Manchester city centre, and whilst this next door neighbour undertakes some serious renovations. So their ability to work at home is very different to other people's. So I think whilst we'll see a long-term shift towards homework and businesses will realise that they can reduce their overheads, they can reduce their costs by shifting to homework, and I do think there is still a need for the office, and I think businesses are starting to think about. They're really starting to rethink the benefits of offices and what offices are for, and I think the days of packing us all into tightly dense offices, cramming us in kind of battery chicken style onto desks where we all just sit there all day and work at our PCs. I think that's gone. I think what we're now starting to think about offices as are locations where we come together as teams and as organisations to work on problem solving, creative collaboration, working on projects together, and actually some of the social side. I think what I'm picking up from a lot of companies is that what they're really missing is the kind of social and team building side of the office environment. So I think going forward, and Councillor Fairfield kind of picked this up before. What we'll see going forward, I think, is a kind of change in the format of the office. So we'll move away from rows and rows of desks and PCs, probably rethinking that space into more meeting space, more collaborative space, more social space where people will kind of come in and meet and probably have that balance of working at home a few days a week, going into the office once or twice a week. The other thing I think we're then starting to see as a result of that is organisations, and particularly big corporate organisations, rethinking, the big corporate HQ, and certainly picking up some evidence that companies are starting to look at hub and spoke models now. So whether you then have just a big office in Manchester or a big office in Birmingham or London, actually still having that presence in those big cities, but that will probably be much reduced, and then probably picking up some more flexible space and some smaller hubs in kind of regional towns and smaller cities where, again, people could commute into that, or something that's much closer to home for them to commute into. I've even picked up examples of organisations talking about kind of renting desks in co-working space rather than in a number of localities, and then having a smaller city centre office as well. I think organisations are starting to think about a few things around getting workers back into the offices. Health and safety is key. So persuading their office workers that the office environment is safe to go back to is going to be key. I think there's going to be much more focus then on kind of technology and contactless in offices, obviously making them more socially distanced. And again, I think Councillor Fifield picked this up before. I think that'll balance out in terms of demand for floor space. I think we probably won't see a massive overall reduction in the amount of floor space that organisations might be looking for. It'll be how they configure that floor space. So because with social distancing rules and changing formats of office space, they probably will still need a fair amount of space just for less staff to work in. And then I think just kind of closing really, I think this could be quite an opportunity for somewhere like Cheshire West and for Cheshire and Warrington as a whole. That shift out of the big cities over the as it might come over the next few years could see opportunities for us in places like Chester, places like Northwich, and our kind of smaller towns, because if we can start to develop the right product around incubation space, innovation space, co-working space, I think that will attract people back into those locations. And I think hopefully what we might see from this is a shift from the big cities towards smaller, more sustainable locations like Chester, like Northwich, Winsford, etc. So that's probably all I want to say for now. I'm sure Heather's got something to add to that. Hopefully I haven't said everything she was going to cover as well.
I think you've pretty much stolen my thunder there, John.
Sorry.
Do you want to go ahead, Heather?
Yeah, so I'm Heather. I work for Cushman & Wakefield, and for those who don't know, Cushman & Wakefield, we're a global real estate services firm. I'm in the development consulting team, advise quite a lot on town centres and employment sites, but always working quite closely with our various agents. We've got office agents, retail agents, industrial, residential investment, so across the whole spectrum of sectors. I'm also a Delamere resident, so I know Northwich and Chester and Winsford and Frodsham and all the local sort of towns very well. I think John's pretty much covered off everything that I was going to pick up on. I think one of the things that the big trend we'd seen over the last decade or so was really around that polarisation of office occupiers. The big corporates are getting bigger. In the 10, 11 years I've been at Cushman & Wakefield, we've been DTZ, then UGL and DTZ again, and now Cushman & Wakefield. So through mergers and acquisitions, they're getting bigger and bigger. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the smaller one-man bands, those small, flexible service providers doing a whole wealth of different things. Some of them are home-based, some of them are driving this boom for, or what was a boom for, this co-working flexible space that we were seeing in city centres. So I think that's the background as to why the market is polarised, and at both ends, both the young, quite often these are tech-driven firms, these smaller ones. They're young, they're agile businesses, and they're out of favour with those sort of traditional business parks. They either want to be in a city centre where you've got restaurants and bars and you can get to by public transport. I think we're at the lowest level of car ownership for the under 30s in years. Or they want to be in a sort of flexible, trendy space where they can come and go as they please. So that is definitely something we've seen around that boom in co-working. And some of that's also been driven by the relative shortage of good quality office space. A lot of office space is now quite dated. It's very costly to build new office space. It's only really financially viable in the major city centres, which has been a real challenge. We have seen some new office space in Chester, for example, at City Place, and where it has been able to be delivered, it's generally had public sector support, but it's let well. It's been popular. It's shown that there is the demand there when the quality of space is there that enables occupiers to attract and retain the staff that they need to. The co-working space has taken a massive hit in COVID, largely because they were short-term leases. So people were suddenly home-based. They didn't need to be in, or they weren't able to come into the city centre and work in a communal office, which has obviously hit the books of these co-working operators quite hard. But I think because of the long-term trends underlying that, they will bounce back in the longer term. And as John suggested, I think there's opportunities for some of the smaller secondary, perhaps previously seen as secondary town centres, to make use of what we're anticipating to be this sort of spoke and hub model, with people coming and going and perhaps using more local centres rather than commuting into the major city centres. So I think there is an opportunity there. If the viability of bringing forward those high quality spaces that have the tech infrastructure in place to make them work, but underlying, we've actually seen quite a lot of viewings in the city centres and town centres from office occupiers now that people are allowed to move around more. We don't think the impact on office rental levels will actually be quite as bad as we initially thought. There's a general lack of, instead of good quality space, so that will help rental levels not stay fairly consistent. We did anticipate less space. People would want less space, but again, as John's mentioned, I think it's just different use of space. That might be more local centres, or it might be using flexible space. We've got to social distance. How long that will last, that obviously has space requirements, but ultimately we think the importance of community and collaboration, whatever sector you're in and whatever scale of business, is so important to office occupiers that there will still be that demand for offices. I've personally only been back into the Manchester office twice. I was working a day at home a week anyway,
I have no desire to go back into the office 5 days a week with a long commute into Manchester from Delamere. I found that I've got time to run before work in the morning, and I've now got an evening at my leisure. And also, it's not that nice being in an office where, as a big corporate, we have to wear masks in meetings. We've got very strict one-way systems in place. It's not actually that pleasant an environment to be in. But I've really missed out on speaking with co-workers. I've been in meetings with clients where clients have said, "Oh, you've just won this job, haven't you? And we're working with Cushman & Wakefield on such and such." And I've gone, "Are we? I didn't know about that," because we're not having that interaction that you would have if you know, those water cooler conversations that we would have if we were in an office. So yeah, and also the importance, particularly in town centres and market towns such as Northwich and also like Chester, is that getting people living in town centres, I think, is a big trend and something that a lot of places are trying to do, and is really important to both driving footfall and supporting economic growth aspirations. You know, if you're wanting to get people into jobs, then they need to have the housing there that can support that economic growth. So yeah, not a lot extra to add really, other than what John could have said.
It's really interesting to hear people be so positive about, you know, things. We're obviously living in a time where people are worried about the future, but to hear the idea about kind of new emerging businesses wanting to be in town centres rather than out on a limb, to be able to kind of spend time together in social spaces and everything else, it does sound like something which is very much supportive of the future of high streets, really. You know, a reduction in retail space and a return to other kinds of uses, and the live-work kind of mentality of living in a town centre, working close by and socialising close by.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges of it, though, is from the landlord perspective, is that people want the flexibility. There's a lot of uncertainty, and so they're wanting shorter term leases. Now, whether that means they have to pay higher rents, or it just, from a landlord's point of view, it's a real challenge, isn't it? Because you've not got that security of a tenant for the longer term, and whether or not how much you want to invest in your property to attract new tenants. If they're only going to stay a short amount of time, it's a real challenge and balancing act, really.
It's really, really good. I've just got Jane's got her hand up, Jane Hoff, so I'll let her come in a second. I've just got 2 questions quickly. This kind of change that you've described of offices changing shape, if you like, or changing format, less desks, more meeting space. Will property owners do this for themselves? Is this something that's already happening? And what's the role of the council in facilitating this kind of thing?
I think internally, an occupier will generally do their own fit out to suit their own needs. So I think from a corporate point of view, they would do that, and they would take that into the cost of doing that into their negotiations in terms of rental level and lease level, etc. The flexible working space operators, again, that's their model. They have a lot of collaborative space. They build that into that model when they're refurbishing, and they're quite often quirky buildings when they're putting that in there. The challenge, I think, is that there's a lot of cost associated with that, which works well or works viably in city centre locations where the rents are high enough to support that level of cost. Yeah. In smaller town centres, it's a lot harder to create that quality of space, because you've got the more communal space you're actually renting out less occupiable space.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That sort of coffee space is great for meetings and chats with other businesses, but actually that's not making the money, is it? You've got to cover the rents somehow, whether that's higher rental levels on a hot desk or a small 1-2 man office, and that's the cost of building and creating that space is quite expensive relative to those rates. So there is a challenge in the smaller centres with lower rental levels, and we have up in Oldham, for example, they've been looking at whether or not they can convert. They can use future high street funding to convert an old, really nice old listed building into flexible working space that is managed and operated by the council, I suppose, in the same way that you would operate, business support space and grow on space in other locations.
And I guess if that's located close to somewhere like Chris's business who was speaking before, then actually you still get that community feel and that sense that you can pop out and grab something in it with another operator, but that your workspace is close by, and then the developers can still maximise the use of their co-working space and the coffee shops and everything else.
And that's what the occupiers want. They want a coffee shop next door where they can have an informal meeting. They want to be by a train station. You know, they want easy access and a vibrant place to be.
Makes sense. Jane, do you want to say something? Oh, sorry, John.
I was just going to add to your question. Really, I think the couple of things kind of spring to mind, and kind of Heather's touched on a couple of them. I think one obvious thing is that I think the old office buildings will struggle to adapt. So the more modern ones that we've seen over the last few years have been big floor plates with few internal walls, and that they'll adapt quite easily to this new format. I think it'll be the older, more traditional offices that will struggle. One thing I do wonder in that kind of shift from bricks and mortar retail towards different uses is whether there is a model around converting some retail space into co-working space, and whether that's done as part of your Stronger Towns programs, Future High Streets programs. And then I think, picking up on Heather's point, I do think in some of our locations we probably do need to look to the public sector more than the market to help deliver some of this. So whether that's either the public sector providing gap funding, or, as Heather says, in some locations the public sector doing this themselves and operating that, or at least kind of outsourcing the operation of it, but kind of holding the long-term covenant on it. So I think there is a kind of role there for local authorities in trying to stimulate that environment,
helping with change of uses and all that kind of stuff. Okay, good. Jane, you were going to make a point.
Yeah.
Just conscious of time. I'll extend the meeting by 10 minutes.
I'll be very quick, Richard. Don't worry. John, I can support what you were saying about people moving from city centres into more rural locations. And I know we have a bid board member who's a solicitor and has never been so busy, with house sales, and our estate agents are really busy. So people are moving from Manchester to Northwich. And my next point is a question to our councillors, actually. Is there an opportunity here, if we can gather the evidence base, to suggest that people are moving from Manchester into Northwich? Obviously, the business centre in the centre of Northwich is a very old building. It's part of the redevelopment of Weaver Square master plan. Is there an opportunity here for us to look at co-working space within? I know it's been looked at before, but I think this is a marvellous opportunity to look at it again with a pair of fresh eyes within the Barons Quay development. We've now got the Coffee House and Bear who've moved in. You've got good operators there. This is what people want. I mean, I always use the example of the Outset in Warrington. I don't know if you're all familiar with that. It's a co-working space. It's fresh, it's new, it has hubs, it has that space. People they network together. That's how intertrading comes about, and that's how you retain in that business within the local economy. And I just think there's a marvellous opportunity that we could jump on here.
We will pick that up, Jane. I think there's Caroline Thomas and Steph Ramsden are both on this call. They'll have heard what you said there, and I think that there are other things, other ideas circulating around Barons Quay that could potentially be tied onto this kind of stuff. I do agree with what you're saying. I think we should be listening to what you've said there. So no problems. Right, I'm going to extend the meeting by 10 minutes unless I've got any major objections, just because Karen is our award-winning market manager, and we should give her enough time to speak and say what she would like to say. So thank you so much to Heather and John. Please do stay. Listen to our award-winning market manager, Karen Bates.
No pressure. It's fantastic actually to hear all the different scenarios and what's actually happening, because it kind of rings some truth in what we're experiencing in markets as well. And we've got some great stories alongside, we've got some trying times, the same as what Jane was alluding to before, quite a mixed bag of some people are being really successful and other people are not. so much so it's about that kind of adapting and become resilient in the marketplace. I think really with markets, as we all know, they are an integral part of regeneration. And particularly at the moment, what we are seeing, which is fantastic for us, is that we've already had 62 new trader inquiries actually since lockdown. And that's, I suppose, really the points that I'm making is that I suppose the uncertainty now that's added with COVID and more so about job stability and about, people have been furloughed or made redundant, that we're seeing an increase now that people are actually wanting to take that leap or that little mini step at first into their own business. And I think marketplace gives that flexibility. And I think it's very important, really, because it is a test bed, it is a stepping stone and it's quite low risk. And I think really added to that is the support that we can give as a council, being the landlord, and equally that it's like a market family with the other traders. So everyone feels like they're in it together. And I think that's really important. And I think for me, it's been successful in that we've had quite a lot of traders working in collaboration with each other. And I think that's important, that businesses have started to evolve now, where we're seeing a lot more that are offering delivery, which is great. Click and collect, your Deliveroo, you Just Eat and online sales. And a big one as well that we've been able to introduce in 2 of our markets more so has been the alfresco offer, and it's that adapting to the current climate that we're in and that we face. I think, it goes without saying that we've built up marketplaces now where people, it is leisure, it is pleasure, and condensing seating areas has been quite a challenge, but we've taken that challenge on board and explored the outside option. So the alfresco offer has been incredibly successful, and I think in keeping people safe and that customer confidence in the spending. I think we've had a couple of challenges, I would say, along the way, and like everyone, I suppose, customer confidence in returning back to the high street. I think that's been, fundamental in that, people are starting to come out, boost the economy again, the spending. And I think from the point of view that Charles was making earlier for us, about the people returning to offices and stuff, because it's not just, I suppose, about, okay, you haven't got that commute. It is that social aspect that Heather touched on, but it's also about that mental well-being. And I think it's okay. Some people can adapt well to it and others can't. And I think I do allude to the fact that what John was saying, that it has been quite a challenge and a little bit of a nightmare that I found when I was working from home and homeschooling a 10-year-old. So, that in itself was very, very difficult. And also you've got your other family, which are your dogs that bark every time a delivery hits the door. So, these are things that have been quite challenging for that I can only obviously state from my own experiences. But I think it's crucial for us to get that economy back going and people coming out in the high street, because, this is about really boosting that economy again, making people. And I think what we found is our lunchtime offer kind of reduced, but it goes without saying that help out to eat out has been amazing. We have found that the markets that are offering that food and drink, it has just been amazing. And the traders, I think have really kind of, I suppose, appreciated that experience. I think there's a couple of things as well. We've still got a couple of challenges ahead of us, particularly really about traders and them adapting. Now, it's great for the resilience of small businesses because they do have the ability to change in a short time. It's just the ones that know how to adapt and change, or giving them that extra, upskilling them more digitally. And I think really we've had quite a few trades that have been helping others. So that's been kind of interesting, particularly in the marketing side and partnerships with fellow traders. I think there was a lot of camaraderie with lockdown of, right, we are essential traders, so we're going to do our bit. And it's been really pleasing. And you know, heartfelt for us that we've been able to accommodate so many local people that really struggled with the home deliveries from supermarkets or not being able to get the groceries that they needed to. So I think that's been really, really important. And I just hope that customers keep that going and remember those people that are kind of helped them in their hour of need. You know, and I think that's a big one for us, the same as, you know, what Jane was saying about safe place to visit. I think it's all about encompassing, you know, that local and that safety. I think what was important that we received some information which was quite interesting facts from NABMA, which is the National Association of British Markets Authority, and they did a survey out of 130 stores and 10 retail centres, and they found that 84% of shoppers were wearing masks, but only 34% of staff had protective face coverings. But what the actual survey did demonstrate was that 93% would feel fully confident or quite confident in returning to shops where all staff had masks. And I think that goes without saying, really, that it's crucial that we understand and learn what is driving customers' decisions to visit the high street or not visit the high street. You know, and where do we stand now? You know, how do we best adapt and support local businesses during, you know, these coming months, particularly with the, you know, the winter weather that is upon us. So I think it's a difficult one. I know it's quite controversial. You know, people do have invisible disabilities and whatever, but it's becoming more apparent. And we've actually had feedback ourselves from customers that are saying, you know, I was afraid really because, you know, I went in this market and there wasn't as many staff wearing masks and different things, you know, and it's difficult. You can't wear a mask all day. It really is difficult, but it's kind of what do we need to do to make sure that there's that customer confidence. And so, you know, I completely allude to everything that everybody's been saying, you know, within this, and it's been really interesting. But I think from our perspective, really, the recovery for us is demonstrating in how many trader inquiries that we've received, encouraging and supporting our traders to adapt and evolve to the current climate that we're actually in. You know, we've managed to onboard quite a few businesses now since post-lockdown, which has been great. And a good one for us as well is that we're starting to be able to license market events again. So, you know, external operators really, and bringing things into the city, you know, that people kind of miss. They want to kind of get out there again. We're all social animals. So as much as we need to social distance, you know, we need to kind of, I suppose, embrace that fact that we are social and that we do need to make sure that, you know, we can still kind of have that normality even in this new norm, you know, and whether that be with, you know, COVID risk assessments or whatever, you know, I think that's really important. So for us, it's about more so now is building that resilience for traders. You know, I think on one of the discussions earlier, you know, about some businesses, I think John alluded to it, there was things happening before COVID and, you know, that may be masked by COVID now. And I think that could be a position of, you know, some traders that haven't evolved with time, or, you know, they're not diversifying their products, you know, may have been on that route to failure anyway, but this has just masked it, which you know, it is quite a shame really. But, you know, our intention is to support where we can as best as we can. And I think the biggest point to make on this is that the same way as Chris did about the coffee shop, is that those support packages that have been in place for traders, you know, that we found that we had an overwhelming success rate on the small business rate grant scheme. We had 100% at Northwich of traders that could actually claim on that. We had 96% at Chester. We had 87% at Ellesmere Port. We had 47% at Winsford. And I think from those that didn't actually qualify, that they were able to tap into the discretionary fund via the council. So, you know, without saying, every trader's pretty much been given some monetary support, which has been really good. And the council have really stepped up the plate as well in helping them, with service charge deductions throughout 3 months of that, rent deferments that we can, in the future we can agree an affordable plan. It's getting people back. We don't want to hit people with a stick and say you need to pay your rent, you haven't paid it for these months. We're here to help and support because we want these businesses to remain, in their situ, and obviously get past this difficult stage that we find ourselves in. So I think it's, it's been, we've only had, I think, the success. I mean, unfortunately, we've had 3% across our borough that have actually closed their business post-COVID. So, we want to kind of keep that percentage down as best as we can. So I'm open to questions, guys. I didn't want to waffle too much on because I think I did that quite quickly in a lot short space of time.
Charles, thank you, Karen. Charles has got his hand up first. I've got a couple of questions as well, but Charles, you fire away, mate.
Yeah, thanks. I mean it's I've been thinking it was a bit of a question actually hanging over from one of the earlier speakers, but I think it would be quite useful for Karen's view as well. It was just me thinking about how we can quantify in terms of numbers. Is that obviously I think Jane referred to footfall numbers, but I also thought about the number of when she mentioned about the car parks in Northwich, and I'm just sort of thinking across the borough are we in a better position to be able to see what the numbers of cars parking are doing, and then obviously certainly for Karen in relation to how she can see specifically about the footfall as to how that is measured within the markets themselves, and a slightly longer term thing is, again, as I say, with my day job, when I'm letting shops, I sometimes get market traders who come to me that they've got a successful business in the market and they're looking at running a shop, but often the scenario is that they don't really want more, either they're very much attuned on the market setup, and the idea of taking a lease for several years is quite alien to them, and even anything longer than a few months starts to get a little bit apprehensive. And it just sort of occurs to me that the council is in a good position there, and what is the council doing in relation to upscaling? Not that the market wants to lose it, but certainly in relation to Northwich market, which is the 2 days a week, what have you. Actually, if somebody wants to be in Northwich 5, 6, 7 days a week, what position are we able to be as a council to say, okay, here's a smaller unit that we've got, and you can do it on a monthly basis, which is not something that certainly a commercial landlord is really going to go and take a look at, because for want of a better phrase, it's more trouble than it's worth in relation to be doing the legals, whereas the council is in a better position because of tenancy agreements and things like that it would be in a much better position to do so. So Karen, just sorry, a bit of a wide-ranging thought, but I don't know what your thoughts on that is.
Yeah, and you've got a really valid point there as well, Charles. And I think for us, I mean, we've just onboarded 2 new businesses in Northwich, and we've got 2 more interested. So it's quite exciting. We are getting quite a lot of interest that we're finding now further afield. And I think I think I've mentioned this as well previously in another discussion, that it's very, very challenging for a new business to actually come into a market that's only 3 days a week. And it's about that expanding it. And, hopefully, Charles, we'll be getting together with you guys anyway over on Northwich with the Northwich master plan and the vision for the market, which we'll maybe able to elaborate. But we have got some ideas and some views on how maybe we can change that or adapt to these changes to, I suppose, further encourage more businesses, into the market and in the surrounding areas.
I mean, my general, specifically on Northwich, is that obviously what remains of Weaver Square, to me, is that would be absolutely ideal for effectively starter units or step-up units for market traders who want to go and be there, day in and day out. That those are absolutely ideal. And funnily enough, going back to to what John and Heather were saying about the potential for co-working is again, I think that sort of area, and sorry Jane, I think that the Weaver Square is probably better than Barron's Quay, just simply because actually, okay, yes, they're older units, but we haven't gone invested the same amount of money that we have invested in relation to Barron's Quay, where I do think that because of the short-term nature of the income that's involved with co-working, that might be a better use of the space there, whilst we decide what to do with Weaver Square, which, with the best will in the world, nothing's really going to happen there for another few years, and that space is sitting empty. So why not use it for those retail and office users that are going to be by definition short-term occupiers anyway. Cool.
Thank you, Charles. I have been speaking to Caroline Thomas about units in Weaver Square, and I know there's quite a cost associated with bringing them to a standard that they could be used, which is a barrier. But I suppose it depends, as you say, about what they're going to be used for, and if there is a model that would get that money back and provide some other additional benefit to the high street, then maybe that we need to consider it in that way. I've got a couple of questions. Any other members of the commission got any questions, or should I ask mine finally, and then we'll bring the meeting to a close? Mine, Karen, we're about. Are you a couple of things? How is the footfall doing in each of the markets, and are we getting back to where we were previously? Out of the people that are inquiring, what kind of businesses are they, and is there a difference in the different markets that we have around the borough? And my other question was just around this sense of community and stuff that some of the other speakers have spoke about. I've spent quite a lot of time in Chester Market, and before COVID would have done work there equally in Ellesmere, in Ellesmere Port's kind of food area. I know we've been talking about getting Wi-Fi in there. Are you seeing people with laptops again, or starting to return in any way, shape or form to the town centre in the way that I would have noticed in the past?
Yeah, I'm taking that first point, I suppose, about the community side, because we have clearly Chester obviously has been the I suppose the test bed really for what we hold for future in our other markets that are integrated into the master plan. We have found that now that we are 72% to target in Chester for our average footfall again. So to give you some scope on that, say for instance, our average before COVID was 22,000. I mean, obviously that changes in November, December to like 36,000. We are seeing now that post-COVID, it's been a steady increase. So, which says to me, obviously, more people are venturing out and, feel more confident, whether that's because we've got an alfresco area, I'm not really sure. But we're finding that we've got 16,000 that we're up to, we're 72% of that level. In Ellesmere Port, it was slightly different. We saw this kind of glide and then this peak. Then it kind of stabilised and then it's peaked again. So, they're at 79% to target now, given that their average is 30,000 a week. So, we are seeing, it's demonstrating to us that people are coming back out. We don't have the footfall counters now at Northwich, but it's getting the feedback, what we've been listening to from traders. Now, clearly it has been slow, it has been steady. But what is encouraging is that we're starting to bring new businesses in. We're gaining that interest, which, you could say, OK, that's a bit shocking. Why are people wanting to open their own business? But it goes back to I suppose, the level again of you're limiting your risk. Your low overhead, you get the support that you need. You're in a community place where people visit, so there's different shops. So we do have an advantage, I suppose, and particularly encouraging niche stalls in. So what we found is the actual inquiries have been, we've had a lot of food inquiries, but nevertheless, which has been good, that we've been able to, they might have had an interest for one particular market, but we've managed to encourage them to move to another market. So this has been quite interesting. We always try to do this anyway if we don't have availability at one market from another. What we tend to do is we want to provide that diversity. So it's, as we've discussed before, about curating that space, that people then obviously have those choices, and you haven't got the same, you know, everyone's got similar products. You've got something different, and I think niche stalls work for markets. So what we are finding, we're getting inquiries into, I suppose the boutique recycled, you know, vinyls, books, you know, environmentally friendly, you know, offers, which has been really good for us. So I think for us, we are starting to see, although vastly food, we are starting to see that there's kind of a change now in it's just more niche products that we're seeing that are coming through the door, as opposed to, you know, for instance, we've got an interest at Northwich for bike building, which, you know, is a great one. So it's these niche things, these different things that people want, and that consumer demand. So, and it's great because, you know, small businesses can adapt very, very quickly to that. So that's kind of the level where we're at the moment.
That's great, thank you. I know that we've often heard Altrincham described in this commission as kind of a good example of good practice, but I know that you've had some traders that have moved out with Chester Market and to get shops in the city centre, and that was part of what we were trying to do as well. I noticed the tea shops started up on that row, and obviously the pizza chap has moved on to Watergate Street as well, hasn't he? And the wine shop's taken on a place in Watergate Street too. So it is.
Oh, you know, it's massive, because it's a great success story for us, because, you know, they've tested the water in the markets, they've built that customer base, and now they've been able to expand. And I think that's amazing for people to do that. Really? Markets really are a stepping stone for a business and young entrepreneurs. You know, and okay, we do get traders that like to stay because obviously maybe our rents are lower, or maybe they just don't want to leave the market family. I don't know. You know, and we do find that, but it's that, you know, it's that building on that success. You know, we're sorry if anybody leaves, but we also think that's amazing, because, you know, they've achieved what they wanted to do. And I think that's really important for markets to evolve and bring in young entrepreneurs, definitely.
Good. Okay, has any other members of the commission got any other questions for Karen? I'm aware that I can see that we've overrun a little. Jane, yeah?
Yeah, could I ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
Karen, I'm just thinking about the other way around. Obviously in Northwich we had Dilworths, who was based on Leicester Street for many, many years. And for whatever reason, they've chose to move to Northwich Market. And I just think, you know, is there an opportunity, if we do have independents going forward who may find it financially difficult within the town centre setting, that might want to go and move into Northwich Market? I think there's an opportunity there to kind of keep that on our radar, because the last thing I want through the sustainability of Northwich is to lose any businesses from Northwich, whether they're market traders or whether they're in the high street or even Baronsgate. So I think that needs to be on our radar. But I also think as well, you know, this opportunity that Caroline Thomas has been working on with Joe Comrie around the outdoor market and the open green communal space. What an opportunity that is to drive footfall not only to those businesses in that area, but also into the market. And if those units that are going to remain in Weaver Square, I appreciate there's a lot of investment to go into them, but does that area become that hub of market trader to that stepping stone of an easy in, easy out option, white boxing area, to then being helped and progressed into the high street or even to Baronsgate in years to come? Is that an opportunity that potentially could be explored?
Yeah, no, it goes without saying. Absolutely, I agree, Jane. And I think, you know, working in collaboration with BID, as yourself, Northwich, is fundamental to the success of our market as well, and in partnership with other businesses around. I think we found that with the Chester bid as well, you know, working events together, you know, doing different things, getting involved, marketing each other. It's all those type of things as well. And I think it's it's really important that, you know, the door is always open. But I think it goes without saying, if we build, they will come. But we need to look at what our, you know, what our offer is really, and maybe that is expanding our days that we open, you know, what we do. I mean, that in the new vision of the new market, that is definitely something we want to move forward with. This 3-day market is kind of a bit old hat. It's not really where we want to be. We can't encourage new businesses doing that. So I think it's very, very important. But absolutely, I'm very, you know, open door for that, Jane. Yes.
Yeah, no, most definitely.
I think it's important, you know, we've got some good ideas forming around Weaver Square for the markets as well, and I think there is the outdoor area gives us some opportunities to try some of that stuff in the same way that's been tried in Chester before we've gone ahead and built a new market there. So I think the market strategy generally is good, and I think, you know, Ellesmere Port, it's obviously a central hub for the town, and I know that there's some interesting ideas about some format changes in there, free Wi-Fi, different types of tables for people to do some work, looking at the flea market and other uses for that, other as well as a flea market, but using that space in other ways. So I feel like we are utilising markets as a driver for the economy in our towns, and it's good to hear. So thank you for coming, Karen. I really appreciate it. Okay, committee members, our next meeting is the 9th of September next week, 3 till 5. I think, Beth, when are we sending out the agenda? Still with
us? We'll send it out early next week.
Early next week.
Yeah.
Okay, is that all right with everybody? Any other business? Thanks, Jane, for that message in the group. Any other business? No. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your brains. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
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 Thanks, bye.